Hello and welcome to another episode of Varsity360. I am Columbian sports editor Micah Rice, joined once again by Will Denner, coming to you from the First Pacific Financial Studios. We appreciate their support and also their support of high school athletics in Clark County. And we're here to talk some wrestling because, Will, this is the weekend of the 53rd annual Norm Friehauf Clark County Wrestling Championships. It's obviously one of the longest running tournaments that we have in the area. But one of the reasons I really like this tournament every year is that it falls at a point of the calendar where we've kind of had some big tournaments, so we know who some of the wrestlers to watch are, but it really kicks off kind of the home stretch of the season where now wrestlers are starting to gear in towards the district and regional and eventually MAC Classic tournaments. And so Friday and Saturday at Heritage High, 33 teams will be there, 16 boys teams, 17 girls teams. Will, you'll be covering it, the finals on Saturday. It should be a great event.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect opportunity for us to talk some wrestling and get right into it with these storylines. So let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of momentum with local wrestling, especially coming off the back of the Pac Coast Championships,
Yep.
which were bigger and better than that tournament has ever been at the Clark County Event Center at the fairgrounds. So, jumping from that to this tournament, I think there's definitely some themes that we'll be looking for.
Yeah, so first and foremost, the Skyview boys team currently ranked number 4 in the state in 4A. A team that has grown, I think a program that's grown a lot in recent years. Obviously, JJ Schoenlein winning a state championship last year, but then you have Owen Pritchard, who finished runner-up as well. They added 2 dynamite freshmen this year who will help them as well. What do you think of just their depth right now, and how far can this team go this year?
Well, yeah, it's usually when you look at the team races at MAC Classic, there tend to be some powerhouse programs that dominate. South Kitsap comes to mind, Lake Stevens comes to mind, but we've had some years in the past when Union has maybe been in contention for a state team title. But this Skyview team, I think, really has not only the depth among wrestlers that could make a run to the championship matches in that tournament, but also enough wrestlers that have the potential to place. And I think we're going to get a sneak preview of that here at the Clark County Championships. Obviously, JJ Schoenlein, reigning state champion. Really, his only losses this year have come to another state champion in Ezekiel McEwen up at Capitol. Right. But JJ, obviously, he's one of the best wrestlers in the state at his weight class. No matter what classification you go, whether it's 4A and 3A. So you're going to see some state championship caliber wrestling whenever he's on the mat. But then, Owen Pritchard, he's another talented guy that, he made it to the finals of the Pac Coast Championship, wasn't able to wrestle in the finals because of an injury, but he's a state runner-up. And then these 2 freshman twins that they added, Jonas DeRocher at 120 pounds. He is currently ranked number 1, and little caveat, these rankings we were citing come from Washington Wrestling Report. They're kind of the comprehensive database for being able to track kind of what these kids are doing on the mats and at some of these big tournaments. But you have Jonas DeRocher ranked number 1 at 120 pounds. He was 3rd at Gut Check, which is another huge tournament that happened right before the new year, and 2nd at Pac Coast. And then his twin brother, Mason DeRocher, is ranked number 4 at 126 pounds. He was 2nd at Gut Check and 3rd at Pac Coast. So they are a great addition to that Skyview program that just adds to the depth of wrestlers that could possibly be contending for, if not a state title, really high placing when that tournament comes.
Yeah, and also to touch on Kyler Nelson, who's ranked number 7 at 132, Andrew Harrell also number 7 at 150, and Nathan Martinez number 10 at 138. That kind of rounds out some of their top guys. So that's Skyview in a nutshell. But then there's quite a few other wrestlers who are poised to contend for state titles. We had quite a few, it seemed like, runner-up finishes last year, or even just third place. We'll lead it off with Union's Noah Koyama, who won the Pac Coast. What did you see from him at that tournament? And I guess what's kind of his ceiling for this season?
Oh, I think he's wrestling as well as he ever has in his high school career. I mean, obviously he's ranked number one at 138 pounds. He's lost just once this season, one Pac Coast, one gut check. So being victorious in a big tournament like that, I think is really key to translating that into success at Matt Classic. And he's someone that just, I think, has that experience of making the state championship match last year. I talked to him after his Pac Coast victory, and he said he's made some tweaks in his preparation. He does a much more involved warm up before a match so that he's hot and ready to go when he steps on the mat. And so he is definitely one that at the Clark County Championships this weekend, that'll be a sneak preview to a potential state championship quality of a wrestler right there.
For sure. And running through a few more names, we got Mason Fry of Prairie, also a really good football player. As a side note, Elliott Scott of Camas, who's ranked number 3 at 215 pounds of 4A. And then a couple of Mountain View guys in Nathan Wadley, who's ranked number 3 at 165 pounds, and Aiden Denbo, another great football player, ranked number 2 at 215 in 3A. I guess of those four, who are kind of some guys that you're excited about to see for the rest of the way this season, and kind of, again, the potential of those guys?
Well, I'll be interested to see if Mason Fry and JJ Shaneline end up both wrestling at 175, and if so, that could be a great match for a Clark County championship. Obviously, you have Shaneline, the reigning defending champion, but then Fry again, ranked number 2. So he could use that. There's been a lot of wrestlers that I think have used a great performance at Clark County to kind of catapult them into the stretch run of the season. So if Mason Fry ends up getting that match, if he does indeed wrestle in the same class as Shaneline and making it, even if he doesn't win, a good performance against a kid that's as tough as JJ, I think could really propel a wrestler like Mason.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one more that kind of is a standout, I would say, is Tennyson Kurtz at Columbia River. He's currently ranked number 2 in 2A in the 157-pound weight class. And he's kind of contended for a couple years now. He placed 3rd, I believe, last year at the Matt Classic, and 4th the year before that. So he's kind of been circling this for a few years now. What do you think kind of needs to happen for him to take the next step?
Well, I think he's another wrestler that, especially this season, has really kicked it into a higher gear. Obviously with him, he's kind of, he comes from a wrestling family. His brother Addison was a great wrestler at Columbia River, but he's just been, in contention for such so many of the big tournaments the last few years. And so with that kind of experience, and especially I think he's pretty successful on the club and the freestyle scene as well. And so a lot of big match experience, big tournament experience, again, coming at 2nd at gut check, which, that's as high level of a tournament as you'll find during the regular season here in Washington State. And so I'd expect some big things in the postseason for Tennyson Kurtz of Columbia River.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue. So Kurtz is one of, I should say, one of 9 returning championships in the boys for this Clark County Championships. We won't obviously go over, the same exact people we just talked about, but between Koyama, Pritchard, and Shaneline at Skyview, there's Kurtz, Nathan Wadley from Mountain View, but then combined with Union's Armando Nicasio, Camus's Jackson Lugan, and then we also have Washougal's Brody Davis and Hawkinson's Liam McKee, all returning champs from last year's Clark County Championships. So that should make for a great boys tournament this weekend.
Well, I mean, you look at it, it's wild that you have 14 weight classes. In 9 of those weight classes, you might have a defending Clark County state champion wrestling for a repeat title there. And I think this is one of those things that kind of goes in cycles here in the area. You have years where the talent is up, and maybe other years where it's not so high. But this is definitely one of those years, I believe, that the talent is extremely high in Clark County, and a lot of that has to do with the experience.
Yeah.
You have how many kids we just mentioned that placed high at MAC Classic last year that are back and contending, ranked in the top 3 for the state rankings, and definitely have a state title on their mind. So I think that's one of the great things about this Clark County Wrestling Championships is that it serves as sort of a preview for wrestlers to watch coming down the home stretch, like I've said. And with so many kids chasing repeat titles, I think you're going to just see a high level of talent on the mat this weekend.
So let's talk about a couple small school guys as well. Isaac Cromie of La Center, who's currently ranked number 2 in the 165-pound 1A. He placed 4th last year at the MAC Classic. And then there's also Ashton Baker of Kingsway Christian, also ranked number 2 at 150 pounds in 1A, who placed 5th. And it's worth noting that of our 3 state champs last year, 1 came from La Center. It was Malachi Wallaway. So, you know, obviously there's a lot of talent in those ranks as well. What have you seen or kind of heard about these 2 guys? And I guess what kind of, ceiling do they have this year?
Well, I mean, I think they want to do what Malachi did last year, which was he was a Clark County champion, and use that to kind of catapult his season to where he gets there under the bright lights at the Tacoma Dome and has a great championship match against a freshman from Castle Rock who he ends up winning, I believe, in overtime. So, you know, I think when you get into the smaller classifications, there isn't a lot of difference between some of these state champion weight classes and some of the other really good wrestlers out there. And so I think, you know, what those kids are looking to do is have a strong showing this weekend and then use that to build momentum and take it all the way through districts, regionals, and ultimately to Tacoma.
So let's also talk about the girls tournament. We got to start obviously right off the bat with Prairie Junior Faith Tarrant, who's already a 2-time defending state champion. I mean, I guess first of all, before kind of getting into, you know, the rest of this season, I mean, can you just kind of describe like how rare it is for a freshman to come in, obviously win a state title, then repeat, and now kind of be in this position? I mean, obviously it's a rare thing, but also just kind of what makes Faith such a special wrestler and that has allowed her to do this already?
Well, she's been our all-region girls wrestler of the year the last 2 years. I've had the privilege of doing that story because I don't think you'll find anybody that has a bad thing to say about Faith Tarrant either on the mat or off the mat. Yeah. I mean, talking with Prairie coach Rob Smith, he cites Faith's ability to use leverage and body position. And for, you know, at that 235-pound weight class, she's also incredibly quick. I remember the championship match she won last year is sort of a deal where she sort of used the opponent's momentum. The girl took a shot and kind of she sort of used her momentum to kind of carry the opponent over her and onto the mat. And then she's just a ruthless finisher once she has her opponent on her back, but also just a wonderful personality. You know, she's a story that I've heard many times is before weigh-ins at the state championships, she'll get all the girls together and have them all pose for a photo just because more of a celebration of them all making it there, whatever obstacles they had to overcome, and just celebrate each other's talent and also celebrate how far girls wrestling has come. Yeah, it's come a long way in the past decade. And so now it used to be where you just have a few girls that would wrestle and especially wrestle at a high level. Now the brackets are so full. Last year was the first time, of course, that they split the girls field into 3A, 4A, one tournament, and then 2A and below for a separate tournament. And I think you've seen with Faith Tarrant and Nia Cassidy at Union, another state championship contender, just how far that level of wrestling has become on the girls' side, how far it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to Nia Cassidy in a second, but we did want to touch on also another Prairie wrestler and a returning Clark County champ in Aaliyah Young, who's currently ranked number 3 at 170, and she could be in for an interesting matchup potentially at the Clark County Championships this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, there's a potential she could go against Evergreen's Cadence Burleson, who's ranked number 2 at 170. And so Cadence obviously is known more for her softball ability. She plays catcher for the Plainsmen and is headed to college to play softball there. But she's kind of come on this season as being someone who, maybe wasn't at the forefront of wrestling on a statewide level last year. Now she made it to the Pac Coast Championships, or made it to the championship match at Pac Coast. And like you said, is ranked number 2 at her weight class. And so that could be a great match at 170 against Aaliyah Young, a Prairie wrestler who I know Faith has, talked about how close of a bond they have and how tight that room is at Prairie High School among the wrestlers there, how much they support each other. And so I think if that matchup ends up happening, that could be really good to watch.
Absolutely. So the Prairie Girls won the team title back in 2022 at this. Last year, it was Washougal who won a close one over Union, with Kirsten Lease leading that Washougal team. She obviously has some aspirations as well of contending for a state championship this year. I guess what have you seen from her so far, and not only this season, but just kind of her career to date?
Well, she comes from an incredible wrestling pedigree. The Lease family out at Washougal, Abby Lease kind of was the first one who came through and really racked up multiple state titles, and then their brother Tanner Lease, made it. It was a state championship contender the last few years, and so for Kirsten, it's just sort of channeling that Lease legacy. And so, obviously, the girls program at Washougal, which is run by Heather Carver, a very successful program out there, and so I think it's just a matter of. Can she take that step that definitely her older sister was able to take? But obviously, anytime you're talking about a Washougal wrestler with the Lease last name, you're talking about someone who's pretty talented.
Absolutely. And talking about legacy, I mean, on the topic of Nia Cassidy, obviously that last name is pretty prominent in Union's program as well. She obviously won the Pac Coast this year. I think was runner-up at state last year as well. Again, I guess what have you seen from her so far?
Well, I think her ability to command the mat and kind of keep the pressure on her opponent is what makes her so effective. I mean, I remember that championship match at Pac Coast. She just kind of was stalking her opponent and got her finally in a position where she could take a shot. And then once, obviously she's so technically skilled that once she gets in a grappling position, it's, she's able to use her leverage and use dominant position to really control the match at that point. And so obviously she's someone with a ton of talent, a lot of experience, and just a real fire. She came so close to winning a state championship last year, and it was pretty I guess emotional after that state championship match, having come so close. So she is locked in, and again, another one of those wrestlers that just is wrestling at the top of her game right now.
Absolutely. And then Union also has a couple more returning champs in junior Janessa O'Connell, ranked number 3 at 135, and Virginia Thomason at 190. I mean, so again, another case of Union should be in contention for this team title, obviously, come Saturday at the Clark County Championships.
Yeah, I mean, the Union wrestling room, they have a lot of numbers in there, a lot of talent in there, and it's that old iron sharpens iron saying you hear all the time, and you have that within the Union girls program especially, and I mean, it's been that way for several years. I mean, going back with some of the state championship contenders they've had recently, it's just been one class after another sort of handing down that knowledge, handing down those work ethics, and it's just an amazing thing that they've got going to be able to sustain that level of success year after year.
And then one more, Leah Wallaway at La Center. She's a junior. She's aiming for her 3rd Clark County title. And last year it was kind of neat. her and her older brother Malachi became, I want to say, only the third brother-sister duo in the history of the Clark County Championships to both win titles. So that's pretty special. She's ranked number 6 at 105 right now. I guess, just being a junior and going for 3 already, I mean, that's pretty special in itself.
Well, yeah, it's hard to win as a freshman. Yeah. It's hard to win as it's hard to win as a senior. Yeah. And so anytime you're in the conversation of chasing a 3rd or a 4th title in anything, that's pretty special. But I think it's representative also of, and this will be a great way to wrap this up, it's representative in her of what makes the Clark County Wrestling Championship so special, because it is a true county championship where you can have a wrestler from a smaller program like La Center go against the big boys and the big girls at the 4A and the 3A and come out on top. And you have these kids wrestle against each other in club. They've known each other, and so it's one of those events that I think really ends up becoming a celebration of Clark County wrestling, not only at the high school level but at the youth level. And everyone, they go hard at each other on the mat, but then support each other as they get ready to make the final stretch run into what will become, I think this year especially, a very interesting postseason at the district, regional, and ultimately MAC Classic levels.
Well, obviously no shortage of storylines in wrestling. It was good to talk about this today and kind of break a little bit from our typical basketball and football talk. We're obviously excited for the Clark County Championships this weekend. Let's hope that the weather cooperates as well. Thanks again to First Pacific Financial. We will have coverage obviously on 360preps.com, our social media channels at 360preps on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right, we'll be back next week. Thanks, guys.